Greetings, dear ones, and thank you for the contact today. We welcome your commitment to open this door and this channel of communication. We appreciate your willingness to follow through in making this journey that we are on together and following our lead. The human spirit is often curious, which is its great gift. And the most delightful thing about the adventure on Earth is when that adventure is met with that curiosity and that desire to stretch and expand one's perception of what is real. Last time we talked of the pillar of motivation, the third pillar from the acronym of Lemuria that we have been talking to. Motivation building on love and empathy. And that motivation is that willingness to stretch that perception. And to perceive this world ultimately as God perceives it. With great compassion, the spirit of non-judgment and forgiveness to all that is witnessed here. There is a level of suffering that is undeniable. And it could usefully be called the predicament of incarnation, the predicament of being born. It is not a problem, because problems can be solved and addressed. But life on earth cannot be solved. The external world cannot be shaped and controlled to your will in such a way that all suffering is alleviated. In truth, all that can be done here is to venture deep inside of yourself and reach for the deepest response possible to all that is met here on this journey. To dig deep and find those resources, the spiritual resources and ask that they may guide you through, so that your life here may be of value and service to the whole. There has to be a longing to open that door and to move beyond that plane of judgment, the world of duality, of victims and perpetrators, a world of mindless bumping against each other in harmful ways. But as we move from the third pillar to the fourth of understanding, understanding is not what arises like knowledge. This is not an academic assignment, that as you apply more discipline and motivation to practice, shifting your perception, that you will come to a point of completion and that life will get easier on your terms. The ego will seek whatever path it can find to attain its fulfillment. But to move towards understanding is to discover the deepest truth, that in this marathon race, one cannot make a sprint towards the finish line. In fact, this marathon simply goes round in circles, never finds its own point of completion on this plane. And when that understanding begins to seep in, the ego finds itself coming up against the wall, the limits of itself, where it can take the human vessel on its journey. The will has to yield. One discovers that surrender to divine force is the only way now. And that understanding of the nature of the predicament and the limits of the human response to that predicament and the requirement of divine intervention, not on the outside, but cultivated on the inner plane. All of this is what we must understand to stand under, to devote ourselves to. Because when we hit these limits of where the ego can take us, we've discovered a last plane and the last hiding place where judgment dwells. The judgment towards ourselves. The way we punish ourselves. Because we cannot be the person we want to be straight away. And in our judgment of the self, we remain stuck in a place of misunderstanding. And this fourth pillar of understanding is like the pinnacle of the journey. If you perceive it as an arc, 3 pillars below, 3 pillars on the other side, an understanding at the apex. The tipping point. And to tip over that apex requires the journey into the deepest surrender. To lay down all the struggle of the self to manage and control its life. And to address the predicament of human experience. It can often be easier to have the motivation to empathize, to be compassionate and to forgive the external realm. And that can be often easier because we are allured by the spiritual promise that we tell ourselves that effort will bring its reward. That if I forgive, that my relationships will improve. That if I move in this world in a more benign way, then this world will treat me more benignly. If I am friendly, this world will become friendly. And though in one's respect that is true, it is a rather simplistic narrative to the spiritual path that will often come up against its own frustration and disillusionment. The motivation will wane if we tackle it with that intent. Of us wanting it to lead us to a more promised land. But when one discovers that the predicament of human life remains, that life will continue and the veil of suffering will remain, one does need cultivate a deeper understanding in order that one may continue to expand one's perception and to reach for the penthouse view as God perceives it. To move up that building from the street level to the penthouse. On the street level it is all claustrophobic, noisy, especially in a busy city. If you can follow my vision, an image. But as you move up that building, away from the street level, there is a certain relief that comes. And you see a lot more. Perception expands. But that image can only take us so far, because it is still rooted in duality. It can cultivate this great attachment. To being on that penthouse view. And feeling like one must hold on to that level of perception. And one must surrender that attachment. One must give that up. That three-dimensional perception of the journey from lower to higher. From narrow to broad. It is not linear. And one cannot use that to remove oneself from the predicament. The predicament of being in a body. The predicament of a nervous system. That struggles to adapt to an ever complex, fast-paced, dynamic world that is in a deep state of transition right now. State of chaos. And a chaos that cannot be solved, even by the brightest minds. And in order to remain calm and centered and grounded in the midst of all of that, one cannot have one's ego leading the way. We will remain stuck in that third pillar of motivation. Periods of effort and desire and willingness, and periods of despair. The ebb and flow, depending on our mood. Depending on the level of judgment we have towards ourselves. And this surrender cannot be forced. That limit we come against between the third and the fourth pillar cannot be forced open. But one can at least light a candle for it. To be aware of the need for it. And to begin to pray earnestly for it. To get down on your knees and to say, by my own will, I cannot get me to an end game that I desire. Lord, be with me in my predicament. Take my hand. Guide me. Because I am done trying to control this process. Guide me, God. And in saying those words, we are cultivating our level of understanding. As to what it is to be a human on this planet at this most auspicious time, and what is required. Thank you for the contact today, and for the opportunity to explore this very subtle transition between these two pillars, and to move from a deep, abiding misunderstanding about the journey of human experience, and to in this time allow that to loosen and unravel, so that understanding may appear beyond the veil. Until next time, dear one, blessed be.